He was more than part. He was actually me. And I could not stop crying.
Hello, bonjour, shalom, and welcome to Culturally Jewish. I'm David Sklar.
And I'm Ilana Zakon.
Join us as we explore Jewish art, culture, and identity in Canada. On this week's episode, we talk with Holocaust survivor Maxwell Smart and filmmaker Rebecca Snow on the premiere of their movie, The Boy in the Woods.
Mama always wanted me to be a doctor, but I became an artist and that really shocked her. Now I'm interviewing people in the biz, pros, and newish, but all of them are artists and they're culturally Jewish.
Alana, I know this is our second Holocaust film that we've discussed on this podcast. The previous one was Irina's Vow. I know that we brought up sort of our, maybe I should say, aversion to Holocaust films or Holocaust literature. We both don't like watching movies like this for various reasons. I want to know, has that at all changed for you? What are your thoughts and feelings going into this interview?
Well, I have to say, having done the interview already, I want to watch the film now. I was debating whether I should push myself. It's really hard. Like, I'm sure you feel this way about theater too. When there's like a Holocaust play that you get an audition for that's going on at a local theater, it's like, oh, like, why do I have to watch this? Why do I have to feel these things? Why can't we focus on more positive stories of, Judaism or even just other periods? Is also like so overdone. But hearing Rebecca and Max talk, first of all, really deeply moved me. Like I felt like I was going to start crying during that interview, and hearing Rebecca talk about how different this film is than your typical Holocaust movie made me want to give it a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. And how she talked sort of about that folklore and the magic realism is something definitely that was different. I think that stands out in this movie.
And avoiding the dark images. I think that's the hardest part for me.
Right.
Is like, I don't, like in high school, we were forced to watch these films where it's like so violent and so traumatic. And she was like, you don't really see that much of that. It's really so like about the boy and his imagination and him trying to survive. And to me, that's a framework that I feel I'm more interested in than your typical.
Right. Less gratuitous violence and just destruction everywhere, and more about the relationships and what this child and his friend might be going through in this particular movie. And I think I agree with you. I think this is the first movie the first Holocaust film that's piqued my interest, that I'd say, yes, this sounds like a movie that I would want to watch and get into. So the movie The Boy in the Woods is about Max Smart, a child Holocaust survivor. He was just 9 when the Nazis took his parents and younger sister, leaving him completely alone, where he is forced to run and survive alone in the woods. He lost more than 60 members of his family at that time, and he did not talk to a single person about these events for 70 years until quite recently. And Rebecca Snow is a London-born, Toronto-based narrative and documentary director and writer. Rebecca's first narrative feature, The Boy in the Woods, just had a screening at the Toronto Jewish Film Festival, in addition to winning an Audience Choice Award at the Manchester International Film Festival and the Torchbearer Award at the Miami Jewish Film Festival. Let's take a listen to a clip from the film, and then we'll get right into the interview.
Don't eat the mushrooms off the ground, only those that grow on trees. But not the yellow ones.
When all the mushrooms and berries are gone?
The snare that I taught you to catch a rabbit. This twine in the sack. Flint for a fire. And a knife. Ration your food.
Thank you both so much for joining us today. Max, can you briefly tell us your story of survival?
Thank you. I just want to mention when my apartment that I lived in the ghetto was raided by the Gestapo, by the German army. And I was in prison with my family. My mother, my sister, my grandfather was shot at that time. My mother in jail told me that I cannot follow her no matter what is going to happen. I didn't understand what she meant by that. But I, as a child, you obey the mother. So I said, I'll do whatever you say. When we went outside, I still didn't understand very much what she wanted. So I followed her. She pushed me away. I fell. And she said, you have to try to run away. You have to try to save yourself. You have to live because nobody is left from our family. And please, run away. Please do me one favor. Run away and try to live because nobody is left. I obeyed my mother and I ran away. It wasn't easy. It was hard. I had nowhere to go. My auntie had made arrangements for me to hide at a farmer, a Polish Christian farmer by the name of Jaśko Rodzicki.
Now, you decided to keep this story to yourself. You never told your family about what happened to you. Why was that, and what made you finally decide to share it and write it in a book?
I didn't tell my story because it was very hard to go back to the life that I lived, the pain, the hunger, the misery, the wetness, the being afraid. So I kept it to myself without telling anybody the story until my wife forced me. She said, "You have a story that has to be told to the world. Wow. It has to be told, and it has to be advertised that people should know what happened."
And Rebecca, how did you come across Max's story, and what was your initial inspiration to turn it into a film?
Yeah, so I first came across Max's story when I was making a documentary for History Channel in 2019 called Cheating Hitler, Surviving the Holocaust. And it was about child survivors. And in the film, I featured 3 child survivors, and Max was one of them. And it was actually at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem where I first said to Max, Max, I think your story is more than a documentary. I think your story is actually a movie. This has to be dramatized. And we both kind of joked about, maybe one day we'll do this. And, 5 years later, here we are, the film's just being released. And it was just, there's something, it's felt to me like a Holocaust story that people haven't seen before. Max as a boy spent months and months hiding in the woods. And during that time, he met this other little boy, and they had this incredible friendship and performed this huge act of heroism. And I thought that was something that needed to be explored in a sort of dramatic way.
Max, what was it like for you to watch your story in a movie?
It was the most rewarding time in my life to be able to expose the inhumanity created by a government, a German government, that intelligent people could go out and kill innocent children and kill them like animals who did nothing, completely nothing. This is inhumanity at its biggest. And who suffers most is the children, the innocent children that suffer the most in wars. And that's what happened to me. That's what happened to my sister, was killed. Janek was died, and I could not survive. You could see that all in the film, The Boy in the Woods.
Rebecca, I know that your movie incorporates elements of, you've talked a bit about this before, magic realism or Yiddish folklore as a way to sort of show how Max is coping with the horrors surrounding him. Can you talk a bit about that folklore and what magic realism means to you and what you were trying to achieve by putting it into this film?
Yeah, that was another reason I thought this would be such a sort of fascinating film to explore. The idea of this, basically this orphaned boy being cast out into the woods and having to fight the forces of evil is kind of the premise for any, European fairy tale, very, very, very grim fairy tale, Grimm's fairy tales, and horrifying fairy tales. But it really is sort of, a basis for a lot of fairy tales. And so there was something about that I was interested in exploring, because what would Max as this sort of boy from a town, a kind of urban boy, what would his associations with this place, these mythological woods that he was hiding in be, this place of great refuge, but also great danger for a child, especially a child being pursued by Nazi persecutors. And so that was something I really wanted to explore. So I started really reading a lot of Yiddish folklore and sort of the sort of things he might have been, the childhood stories he would have been exposed to as a kid when, back with his mum and his dad and his sister. And So that's something that, there's a little bit of I introduce a little bit of magic realism. I didn't want to go too far because I'm very aware this is a real story. This is a Holocaust story, Holocaust memory. I don't want to, go too off reality, but I did want to explore. Also, Max is an artist now. He's an abstract expressionist artist, and so what was going on in this young artist mind, this creative mind, as he's trying to process all this trauma and this very mythological space that he's hiding out in. So that's what I was looking at when I was exploring the folklore.
Because at the same time, there's almost this, as there's a growing Holocaust ignorance or even denial, sometimes when movies are, not rooted totally in reality, some audience members or people are going to say, this is just made up stories. This never really happened. Was there any concern? You touched a bit upon it, but was there any concern now that, we're getting too far away from the true nature of this story? What is the audience reaction going to be like?
Yeah, very much so. So when I was writing the film, I allowed myself to kind of go off on a few kind of much more exploratory magic realism tangents, and I ended up bringing it back all the time to as close to reality. At the beginning of the film, it says this is a true story, which it very much is. Amazingly, Max's memoir, The Boy in the Woods, which I encourage everyone to read because the film really is a small part of his incredible story. The memoir provides just this amazing narrative for me. As a screenwriter, it was I don't want to say it was easy because it wasn't, but it was all there. His story is so dramatic, the reality, of it. So I didn't have to wander away from the truth, but with the little kind of injections of magic realism, it's really like some of his dreams, and some of the things the ways he might have been processing the trauma. It's things like that. So I think it's fairly obvious to the audience that the reality is still there. It's not, I didn't go kind of Pan's Labyrinth, which is, by the way, another film I love, Spanish Civil War, very magic realism, but it's very rooted in the truth.
Mm-hmm. And Max, how much input did you have? Did you go to set ever? Did you read early drafts of the script? Were you involved at all in the film process?
To an extent, I did. I went to the site of the filming. I met most of the people. The Jet Klein is a wonderful, wonderful actor. He didn't play me. He lived me. I remember coming in to the set and I saw Jet running towards me, embracing me. I didn't see that it's Jet really, because I didn't connect yet that it's Jet. I figured Yannick. It brought me back to my hiding when Yannick ran to me when I came back, and he cried. He came in and he fell into my arms and he cried. And I remember Jet Klein played a part when Yannick actually died, and when he finished playing, he ran into the tent where I was sitting. He fell into my arms and we cried together. I remember maybe a half an hour. The whole crew, everybody watching us cried. He was so emotionally involved in my life. He was part of me. He was more than part. He was actually me. And I could not stop crying.
Now, you're talking to someone who doesn't enjoy watching Holocaust movies or reading Holocaust books. Now, we can get into the reasons why. Either I've grown up with these stories or I feel numb to them now. What would you say to someone like me who struggles constantly to engage with this material?
In my opinion, this is not a Holocaust story. This is a survival story of children. This is a story about children who are being abused by grown-ups, by intelligent people, by governments, children who suffer. This is not a story about a Holocaust and a camp. This is a story of survival by children who die for nothing, not knowing the reason even why they die. Because grown-ups decide what to do, and they made it so that people became animals. Intelligent people of a government became murderers to kill children for nothing. And I was one of them. My sister was killed, not even knowing what a Jew is, what anti-Semitism. They didn't have no idea why she died. But the grown-up intelligentsia of Germany decided she is the enemy of the government, and they killed her for nothing.
David, it's interesting you asked that, because we've played a lot of film festivals with this film over the last year, and we've had a lot of audience responses, very much like yours, saying, look, I find it difficult to come to these films because I grew up with grandparent stories, parent stories. We've had survivors in our audience. It's been amazing. And without doubt, all of them at the end have said, I didn't think I'd get as much out of this as I did. It's such a different way of looking. You don't see a lot of the horrors on camera in this film, which is also another reason why a lot of people have responded with young generations need to see this film. This is about a 12-year-old boy surviving this beautiful relationship he has with this other boy in the woods, surviving together. And it's something that I really think, younger generations can really connect with and also learn about what was happening at the time.
So Rebecca, tell us a little bit about your process working on this. Since you are primarily a documentary filmmaker, how was it like to work on a more fictionalized film and telling Max's story?
Yeah, I mean, it was an extraordinary experience from because I've sort of been working with Max on his story now for about 5 or 6 years between the documentary and this film. And I had so much, because I had these hours of interviews with Max from the documentary, and I had his fabulous memoir, The Boy in the Woods. So I had so much material. And so writing was a wonderful process, challenging for me to write dialogue, because I don't usually write dialogue as a doc filmmaker. But, fun to be getting inside of the mind of a 12-year-old boy, and a Jewish boy in Eastern Poland at the time, definitely different. And then, working with actors was a big challenge for me, because I'm used to getting non-professionals to perform on camera, and actors are a whole different ball game. But it was such a pleasure. We had such a wonderful cast on this film. Max has mentioned Richard Armitage, who plays Yashko. Richard is a very well-established British screen and stage actor. People will know him from The Hobbit. He's very well known for that, and lots of other wonderful films. So, and he was just a complete pleasure. He plays this very wonderful kind of unsung hero, this Polish farmer. And then Jet Klein, who Max has mentioned, who plays Mac, in just this extraordinary actor from out west here in Canada, BC. And he did an amazing role. So really working with the actors was very new for me, but also incredibly rewarding.
Rebecca, before we wrap up, I want to just bring it back to what you said earlier about this film being so different than the typical Holocaust narrative, and how you think young people really should be seeing it. So what kind of strategies is your production using to try to get this film out there?
It's not for you, it's for Rebecca. It's not for me? No, Rebecca. I will answer this question. I remember in Toronto going to one of those question and answer periods. Students. The children, there were 200 or 300 children who saw the movie. They stayed 1 hour questioning. They are interested to know what happened. They cannot understand why I was being hunted like an animal in the woods. They go home. They ask the mother, why did they kill the boys in the woods? What did they do? And the grown-ups have to give them answers. And this is what I want the people to understand. They to teach the children not to hate the way they hated me in my time, because hatred will go on.
We had an amazing screening at the Toronto Jewish Film Festival, where we screened just for first of all, we had big audience there, sort of all ages, and then we also had the Toronto Jewish Film Festival had a bunch. They had a student screening, which was amazing. I think it was middle school students, and we had some incredible questions from them. I think that's what Max was referring to there about his experience. And I mean, our distributor, Photon Films, our Canadian distributor, is very much working on a kind of educational aspect of this film. I've definitely had people come from TDSB, from, American school boards saying, please, please, please talk to our school board about making this accessible. So we'll see. It really is a film for everyone, very much younger generations also, but very much, adults and anyone who is interested in being completely moved by this incredible story. So hopefully we'll see a lot of it out there.
Max and Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us today. We wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
I can't date women right now because I'm too busy calling myself a piece of shit.
I had a dysfunctional Jewish mother and I had a dysfunctional Native mother.
I had 25 full years of utter struggle and failure.
I started to realize the absurdity of my inability to let go of this monster of guilt.
Sounds like fun, doesn't it? Hi, I'm Ralph Benrig. I'm the host of Not That Kind of Rabbi, where we look at people's spiritual journeys and take a little time for their self-reflection, and maybe yours. You can get it all at thecjn.ca/NTKR or wherever you get your podcasts.
So moving on to our listing section of the episode, I have a lot of events going on in Toronto coming up. First one being the Summer Jam of 2024. Join Ashkenaz Festival once again at Earl Bales Park in North Toronto for the second edition of this concert series. It starts on July 15th and goes until August 26th. This is a collaboration again with Magen Boys, and there are 4 exciting and eclectic double bill concerts on alternating Monday evenings. So be sure to check that out if you're in the Toronto area. And the CJN will be there if you want to stop by. We won't be there because we're not in Toronto, but you can meet some other staff members of the CJN and pick up a copy of the summer magazine.
Also happening in Toronto on July 27th, there is a Jewish Life on Lawrence Street walking tour where you can visit many of the schools, yeshivas, synagogues, including Congregation Habonim Toronto, founded by Holocaust survivors, and the iconic bakeries and kosher restaurants like the United Bakers Dairy Restaurant, where a lunchtime meal has become a decades-long family tradition. Starting point at the Eitz Chaim School and ending off at Lawrence Plaza. The tour is approximately 90 minutes long. Registration is required in advance for any and all of these tours.
And another Toronto listing, the Summer String Ensemble is providing a week-long session for adults who are keen to connect with other like-minded string players. For example, the violin, the viola, the cello. So this is going to help them explore these instruments and ensemble music. They recommend having completed at least 2 years or more of study, and that's going on from July 8th until July 12th at the Miles Nadal JCC in Toronto.
Lots happening in Toronto, and I'm sure there's going to be lots more happening across this country throughout the summer. We will keep you informed and updated of what's going on. Otherwise, have a great week, everyone. Take care, Alana.
Bye, David.
Culturally Jewish is hosted by me, David Sklar, and
Ilana Zakon.
We're produced and edited by Michael Freeman, and our theme music is by Sarah Siegel-Lazar. We're a member of the CJN Podcast Network. To support our work and everything the CJN does, visit thecjn.ca/donate to make a monthly donation and receive a charitable tax receipt.
Thanks so much for listening, and see you next time.
Remember that joke from Airplane? The old lady asked for some light reading.
How about this leaflet, famous Jewish sports legends?
But in actuality, that's changing. Jews are crushing it in sports around the world, and we are here to celebrate them.
Sandy Koufax gets his 10th strikeout.
Zach Hyman, his first career hat trick. 41 points for Diddy Avdia. It's Sue Bird's building.
I'm Gabe.
And I'm Jamie.
We love Jews and we love sports, but most of all, we love kvelling over Jews in sports.
Together we host Menschwarmers, the longest running Jewish sports podcast in the world. Listen and subscribe at thecjn.ca and wherever you find your podcasts.